3 weeks ago, we reported on the 5 red heifers which are now in Israel. That video created quite a stir in this community, so I owe you an update on the status of what the future might hold for these 5 red cows. We have further information about when the heifer sacrifice might take place, the location of the sacrifice, the altar, and a little more information on their secret hiding facilities. And yes, we have pictures of them there. And even a picture of the secret site where we think the sacrifice is going to take place. And we'll get to that before the end of this video. 3 weeks ago, American Airlines Flight 146 touched down at Ben Gurion Airport with 5 unusual passengers, 5 female cows without a single white or red hair, 5 perfect red heifers. Israel has had perfect red heifers before, however, but this was the first time in nearly 2,000 years that Israel has been blessed with 5 of them, all arriving together. It's been nearly 2,000 years since the last red heifer was sacrificed in Israel, as we said, and today we'll give you more information on them. So, what's the big deal with red heifers? Why is it almost always the most exciting thing prophetically when a new red heifer comes along? Well, because they are a sign of the soon return of Jesus, the Messiah. To a Christian, these heifers only matter prophetically. The Jews believe the ashes of a sanctified red heifer provides them with purity. For Christians, however, the blood of Jesus provides us with our purity. As it says in Hebrews 9:13 through 14, for if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkled the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ? However, as we said, the reason the heifer is important to Christians is it's important prophetically. Jews don't believe Jesus is their Messiah. They don't have faith in his blood for purity. So for 2,000 years, the Jewish people have assumed they are all ritually unclean. Ritually unclean means they can't enter a rebuilt third temple if and when it's built. And frankly, the priests will probably be very uncomfortable even just doing animal sacrifices outside the temple without ritual purity. The Torah says a priest is to be cut off from Israel if he performs a sacrifice without this purity. So why are these sheep, goat, bull sacrifices on the Temple Mount prophetically important? Well, as most Christians know, the Antichrist is going to take them away. So they have to begin before they can be taken away. And the Antichrist is then going to sit in the holy place and declare himself God. That's going to happen at about the same time. This is a prerequisite for Jesus to return. Jesus won't return until the Antichrist is revealed, as per 2 Thessalonians 2:1 through 4, when he sits in the holy place. So for Christians, sacrifices in a temple are major signs of the return of the Lord. And the Jews will push for those things, sacrifices and a temple, if they have a red heifer. It's going to be a major thing if they finally have the ashes of a heifer. So although it sounds like red heifers aren't that important, they are, because they are a sign of the return of Jesus, and they're going to move along prophetic events like the building of a temple. So to understand this update on the 5 heifers, where and when the sacrifices take place, we need to understand why they need to be perfect. Numbers 19:2 through 9, God explained this ordinance to Moses. Speak to the children of Israel, that they bring you a red heifer. So notice, first of all, it's not the priests who bring the red heifer, it's the people. Without blemish, in which there is no defect. This is why the heifers can't have black or white hairs or be damaged in any way. They can't even have a name tag punched into their ears, as most cows do, and on which a yoke has never come. So the heifers can't have worked in a field, been a beast of burden in any way. nor can they have had calves. They have to be heifers. You shall give it to Eleazar, the priest, that he may take it outside the camp, just as Jesus was sacrificed outside the camp, and it shall be slaughtered before him. Then the heifer shall be burned in his sight, its hide, its flesh, its blood, its offal shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, these are all symbols of the crucifixion, by the way, and cast them into the midst of the fire, burning the heifer. Then a man who is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, what's left over after it burned, and store them outside the camp in a clean place. And they shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel. For the water of purification, it is for purifying from sin. Without the ashes of this heifer mixed with spring water, Jews are biblically unworthy to enter their temple. And although there are some people who believe there are workarounds that might allow Jews to think that they still can enter the temple, we're thinking in this ministry that most Jews won't chance it and will want a heifer before they enter the temple. Believe it or not, in the Gospel of John, we see this water purification with the ashes of a heifer referred to. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went from the country up to Jerusalem before the Passover to purify themselves. John 11:55. This is speaking of being sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer, exactly what we've been talking about, so that the Jewish people could enter the temple area on Passover. Jews have been praying for decades for the opportunity to rebuild their temple and for the ritual purification with the ashes of a red heifer. For 2,000 years, they haven't had those ashes. But now they have these 5 heifers that were born in Texas. And they were checked from head to toe back in Texas, make sure they didn't have any black or white hairs. And during the trip to Israel, they remained unblemished. They then went into quarantine as per Israeli national law, and that's the law for any imported animal. And they now have been released and are in hidden facilities. And in just a moment, we're going to show you pictures of them in those facilities. But since our last update, we learned all of them are not quite a year old yet. Jewish law requires them to be 2 years old. As long as they don't grow any white or black hairs in that time and remain unblemished, then in just over a year, they will qualify to be sacrificed in the ritual purification process needed to resume temple services. This should place a potential sacrifice in the fall or perhaps the early winter of 2023 or 2024. They're being raised in hidden secret facilities in Israel. And it seems that after 2,000 years without a heifer, the Temple Institute that's caring for them finally is going to have one. That is why they aren't telling you exactly how old they are. So the sacrifice date remains a mystery. And it's why they aren't telling us exactly where they are yet, because they don't want any problems. Now in the 12th century, the Rabbi Maimonides thought that there were only 9 heifers throughout the history of Israel. And the arrival of the 10th red heifer, quote, would only be found and sacrificed when King Messiah was ready to appear, end of quote. Jews and Christians both see the significance of these heifers in terms of it being a sign of the arrival of the Messiah. If this is truly the 10th perfect red heifer, the Jews are going to see this as an enormous sign to rebuild the temple to prepare for the Messiah. As we said, the heifers are in 2 hidden facilities. The Temple Institute plans to keep one facility hidden, but the other they're eventually going to announce so visitors can come and visit the heifers. That announcement, of course, hasn't come yet. As we also said, it's critical to keep the exact ages of the heifers and their location secret, at least the Temple Institute thinks it's important. It is very likely that if it was known there would be all kinds of protests when the sacrifice was getting close from animal rights activists and extremists who opposed the idea of a temple on the Temple Mount. But we do know where the sacrifice will take place, even if we don't know when it will happen. It's going to take place on the Mount of Olives. The Jews say they know the exact location where the last red heifer was sacrificed. At that time, there was a bridge connecting the Temple Mount with the Mount of Olives. This was to prevent the priest from being made impure by walking over the graves that lined the bottom of the Kidron Valley between the two mounts. The priest would take the heifer over the bridge to the top of the Mount of Olives so that he could see the temple sanctuary, and then he would know when to begin the sacrifice. He would need to be able to see over the top of the east gate and over the inner gate. So the altar had to have been at the summit or top of the mount directly east of the temple. Now, certain instructions were given to Moses concerning the sacrificial altar of the red heifer. It was to be built outside the city. Outside the city was given as 2,000 cubits, or 2,900 feet, 890 meters, to the east of the tabernacle. Let's look at a map where this might be in regard to the Temple Mount. 890 meters east of the Temple Mount would place the site near the current location of the Pater Noster Church at the top of the Mount of Olives. There are two potential sites near this church. One is a grove of trees south of a church as part of their grounds. The other is a parking lot east of the church. The Temple Institute says they know where this sacrifice is to take place. To this ministry, that means they must almost assuredly have spoken and negotiated with the Pater Noster Church to use their parking lot or grounds wherever they feel that right spot is. Now, no one has admitted this, but it is very, very likely. Really, everything else in that area is houses, roads, or streets. It almost has to be there. Now, my personal thought is that this Christian pilgrimage site that you're looking at right now on the peak of the mount might be the place. Notice the perfect view you have from here of the Dome of the Rock, the likely spot where the original temple was. On the night before the sacrifice, this roadway that you're looking at could be blocked off, and the sacrifice done here with little or no fanfare. In fact, at this pilgrimage site, we have this circular area which is an overlook of the Temple Mount area. What a perfect location this would be to roll up an altar, set it up here, and do the sacrifice, overlooking the Temple Mount area. I think this overlook may be the exact spot. I don't know that, but my intuition tells me that. The peak of the mountain is advantageous for a couple reasons. It's the site where the rays of the sun first appear coming from the east. Although there is nothing specifying sunrise as the time, there are other Jewish ceremonies that happen at that time, so it seems like it would be likely then. Also, very few people are stirring at that hour, so there's less chance of the ceremony being disrupted. Remember, they don't want protesters. They don't want disruption. They don't want anything bad to happen. The altar itself was prescribed to be made out of unhewn stone from the immediate area and had 4 walls, filled in with layers of stone until it had a flat surface top. It must have a ramp, no steps, and a ledge around the altar, and the ramp down one side. The mobile altar at the Temple Institute has already fabricated for Temple Mount sacrifices might work perfectly. It meets the requirements and could be carried to the top and set up in the dark in the early morning hours. The heifer then could be placed on the altar, sacrificed, and burned before most people are awake. That is the way I'm beginning to see this happening. What day might this sacrifice take place? Yom Kippur, Feast of Trumpets, Passover? My thinking is none of these. First, they have waited 2,000 years. They are going to get it done as soon as physically possible, before something happens like the heifer becoming blemished or unclean. And we think they'll pick a nondescript, non-holiday day when it will be easier to stealthily get it done, to avoid protests or violence from those opposed. Everyone is going to expect a high holy day, so I don't think they're going to use a high holy day. The Bible doesn't prescribe a certain day. Now, some people have opinions that these new ashes that are produced when the heifer is sacrificed need to be mixed with older ashes from the last burning of a heifer 2,000 years ago. If this was done repeatedly since the time of Moses, this mixing of ashes, this would include then some of Moses' original heifer ashes. A continuity would be established, but there are no rules requiring this. Since the last ashes of the red heifer were either hidden or lost after the temple destruction of 70 AD, most don't think they're going to be found. Now, a guy named Vendell Jones searched for the original ashes by following the map of the copper scroll that seems to indicate a location. If they are found, the old ashes can be added to the new, and they know then that these were from a perfect red heifer because they were from the old ashes. Now, Vendell's original monograph of this search was given to me by a member of this community. This monograph is out of print, but we're going to do an absolutely amazing video on this search in the future. Subscribe if you aren't already and click the bell notification so you can be notified when this very special video comes out. But a question you might have is, why are the Jews so sure of the site on the Mount of Olives? That site is dependent on the location of the ancient temple, right? Well, maybe the temple was somewhere other than where the Jews think it was. Well, click right here to learn that portions of the ancient temple have been found, so you can see them in this video and know where that location was. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.